All right, class, is Mr. Cooper here, and we're going to be diving into lesson 1 of chapter 2, or chapter 2, lesson 1. And we are on page 72 in your books if you're following along there, so go ahead and get to that spot. And we're going to be looking at the question, and we're going to be trying to answer the question, why did the Spanish explore the Americas? Okay, so we might have some ideas about that now, but as we read, we're going to get a better understanding of that. So let's go ahead and get started on our reading. I'm going to be following along up here. Either you are looking at this screen or you are tracking in your book and you're using a pencil or a pen or a finger to follow along, right? Otherwise, I'm going to think that you're not paying attention. So make sure you're either eyes on the screen or following along down here. So let's go ahead and get started. We got the title or the heading, A Time of Change in Europe. During the Middle Ages, the period between ancient and modern times, most Europeans rarely traveled. However, toward the end of the period, they began making pilgrimages or religious journeys to Christian holy sites. Some went as far away as areas in the Middle East considered the Holy Land by Jews, Christians, and Muslims. The contact with new regions made Europeans desire goods from foreign lands. Soon, a new class of Europeans developed. Merchants who made their living by buying and selling goods. They prospered especially in Italian port cities like Venice. They traded for the gems, silks, and spices of China and the East Indies, the islands off Southeast Asia. Members of one Venetian family, the Polos, actually traveled to China themselves and met with the great ruler Kublai Khan. On a second journey, they took 17-year-old Marco Polo. He returned to Italy 6 years later and told of the wonders he had seen. His impressions were recorded in a book now called The Travels of Marco Polo, which further stirred people's imaginations. Another person who encouraged Europeans to travel to new lands was Prince Henry of Portugal, whose sailors explored the west coast of Africa in the early 1400s. So we're moving on to the next page. We're on page 74, first paragraph, and let's start tracking along. Trade with Asia usually moved along a route called the Silk Road. It was named for a product much in demand, Chinese silk. Sometimes goods from China came by sea because the Chinese had made many advances in sailing. Goods from the East Indies also came partly by sea. But whether entirely or partly overland, the trade from Asia had to pass through the Middle East to reach the Mediterranean Sea and Italy. In 1543, the Ottoman Turks captured Constantinople, now Istanbul, Turkey. They cut off most European trade through the Middle East. European leaders began to sponsor or pay for voyages of exploration. They hoped to make their countries rich by finding new trade routes that did not go through the Middle East. Important advances in navigation or the science of guiding a boat made this possible. During the age of exploration, Europe was bursting with religious conflict and change. Spain wished to become an even more powerful country after recapturing land it had lost to invading peoples from North Africa. Spaniards called this violent recapturing of territory the Reconquista. The Protestant Reformation caused many people who were upset with the Roman Catholic Church to break away and form new churches. Some people wished to stay and improve the Catholic Church, an effort called the Counter-Reformation. Competing religions, ideas, and countries would become key drivers of the age of exploration. So over here, we see a map of this section of the world, Asia, Europe, and Africa. So over here we have China and the East Indies and all the goods and spices that they had over there. And the people in Europe wanted those things. They had to go get it either on the Silk Road or meet them, or the Chinese or East Indies would sail and bring their stuff here. But what it's talking about right here is this city called Constantinople. Let me highlight it for you right here. Constantinople. It's right in this area by the Black Sea, where the country Turkey, modern-day Turkey, meets mainland Europe. And so all of the stuff had to come through there. And when the Ottoman Turks took over there, they shut it down, and it became very difficult for people in Europe to get the stuff that they wanted from China and the East Indies. And so the wealthy rulers paid people to figure out new ways to get there and new ways to get the stuff and bring it back. That's what sponsoring means. So let's go ahead and keep moving. So now we're on page 76 in technological advances. This is a quick little side note on some of the interesting technology that was developed during this time that made a lot of this possible. So let's go ahead. The technological advances. The Spanish explored the Americas in a time of adventure and discovery. A number of technological advances helped make their adventures in Portugal's explorations possible. The astrolabe. An astrolabe measures the position of the stars in the sky. It helps sailors determine a ship's latitude, or how far north or south of the equator they are. Europeans learned of the astrolabe from Arab traders in the 1100s. The compass. A compass has a magnetic arrow that points north so that people can figure out in which direction they are going. The compass was invented in China and introduced to Europeans in the 1200s, probably by Arab sailors. The stern rudder. Chinese sailors used an oar that hung off the stern or back of the boat to help control the direction in which the boat sailed. This evolved into the stern-mounted rudder, which directed the flow of water passing over it to help steer a ship. By the 1400s, European shipbuilders had adopted and improved the stern-mounted rudder. The printing press. Around 1450, German inventor Johannes Gutenberg built Europe's first printing press that used movable type to print the text. Printed materials could be mass-produced far more easily and cheaply than handwritten documents. They helped spread news about explorers' discoveries and encouraged others to take to the seas. The printing press is super fascinating because it was what made books more available to people, and people were able to learn about more things, and new ideas came about, and there's just an explosion of learning. Super cool part of history. The carrack. The carrack was a 3 or 4 masted sailing ship developed in the Italian city of Genoa in the late 1400s. It was very strong and useful on long voyages. The Santa Maria, the ship on which Columbus sailed to the Americas, was a carrack. And the last tools that we're going to learn about, the sextant and chronometer. In 1759, John Bird invented the sextant. This tool uses 2 mirrors and a movable arm to measure the angles of stars in the sky. Also invented in the middle of the 18th century, the chronometer is a device that helps keep accurate time at sea. These 2 devices finally allowed sailors to determine longitude, or the distance east or west of the prime meridian. Measuring longitude as well as latitude made navigation and map making more accurate, which is super important. If you're out at sea, this before the internet and GPS, you needed good maps to be able to make sure you got where you wanted to go. So let's stop and check and talk. Based on what you've just read, how important do you think technology was in encouraging the explorers of the day? Discuss your opinion with a partner. Everybody go ahead and let's pause the video and let's talk about this with a partner real quick. So we're moving on to the next page, 78, and we're going to be reading A Sea Route to the Indies. By the late 1400s, Europeans knew that China and the islands off Southeast Asia held great riches. Explorers from Portugal, such as Bartholomew Dias and Vasco da Gama, were trying to reach these lands. They wanted to sail around the southern tip of Africa and then across this Indian Ocean. Christopher Columbus, a sailor from Genoa, Italy, had a different idea. He believed that he could reach the East Indies more quickly by sailing west across the Atlantic Ocean, known then as the Ocean Sea. He did not know the North and South American continents would get in the way. He persuaded King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain, Portugal's neighbor and rival, to pay for this voyage. In return, he would claim lands and open valuable trade for Spain. On August 3rd, 1492, Columbus sailed from Spain with 3 ships, the Niña, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. For weeks, the ships traveled across unknown waters. Finally, on October 12th, a member of the crew called the Lookout spotted land. Columbus would call the island he had reached San Salvador. Today we know it as part of the Bahama Islands. A native people called the Taíno warmly greeted his crew. The two groups exchanged gifts. So over here we see some of the routes, what's going on. So it's important. Remember, our question that's driving this chapter is why did the Spanish explore the Americas? What was the cause, right? And so at the beginning, they weren't even talking about America right now. The whole point was they wanted to find a way to get to China and the East Indies, right? And so Columbus had the idea, like, instead of trying to go around Africa over here, they'd just keep going around the world until they got around to the other side. They had no idea that North America and South America were there. So here is a map that shows some of the voyages. He went multiple times, right? And he went to different parts. And different things happens, and we're going to talk more in depth about that later. So we're going to go ahead and dive into page 80, and we're going to be continuing talking about Columbus. So let's look at this area right here. And on his first voyage, Columbus sailed to several neighboring islands in addition to the Bahamas. He still believed he had landed in the East Indies, but nowhere did he find the riches of the Indies. Claiming the islands for Spain, he reported his discoveries to Ferdinand and Isabella when he returned home. The king and queen soon sent him back on a second voyage to extend Spanish claims. This time he brought enough settlers and supplies to establish a Spanish colony on the island he named Hispaniola. The present-day countries of Haiti and the Dominican Republic are now located on the island. In all, Columbus made 4 voyages to the area. All right. And other explorers soon followed. By now, they knew that the islands were not the East Indies, but part of a mass of lands between Europe and Asia, a new world, as they called it. The name Americas began to be used for these lands in honor of Amerigo Vespucci, who sailed one of Columbus's routes in 1499. In 1513, Vasco Núñez de Balboa became the first Spanish explorer to record seeing the great waters to the west of these lands. Another explorer, Ferdinand Magellan, named those waters the Pacific Ocean. Magellan died as he attempted to sail around the world. His voyage was completed in 1522 by his crew under the command of Juan Sebastian Elcano. The voyage took 3 years. Right, so over here we see a map showing the Taíno lands. Fun fact, Mrs. Cooper's mother's side has Taíno heritage, right? So the Taíno were all around here. Her family's from Puerto Rico. And so there we see the influence of the Taíno Indians that were all around here. So it wasn't necessarily that Columbus discovered it. There were already people there, right? But he was one of the first of the Europeans to find out about it, right, for the Europeans. And so they kept going back to try to find more and more stuff. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up there, and we'll have some more discussion class later. But before we go, I want to do the stop and check and think. What did the Magellan-Elcano voyage prove that Columbus was right about? How did it prove that he was wrong about some things? Go ahead and turn and talk with your partner, and we're going to wrap it up there.